The morning light fell on Britain, but it felt different. The sun itself seemed unsure it belonged here. For generations, Roman roads had carried legions and merchants of an empire that claimed eternity. Now, they carried almost nothing. I walk alone on these roads, the skeleton of a Roman town around me. Walls stand unguarded, columns chipped, buildings sheltering ghosts. Britain was once a place where Rome felt permanent. That illusion is gone. The legions left months ago. They marched out with discipline, banners high, leaving us to fend for ourselves. The message was devastating. You are no longer worth saving. We once called ourselves Romans. Now, we don't know what to call ourselves. Citizenship was more than status. It was certainty. Without it, everything is exposed. Beyond the walls, the land grows wild. Rumors of raiders, of strange ships, fill the air. Who will protect us now? This is not a conquest. It is abandonment. And as I see the glow of a burning village on the horizon, I know this is how a new age begins. With loss, with fire, and with a question that will haunt generations. When the empire's gone, who are you meant to be? The land didn't fall apart all at once. It cracked slowly, like ice under a cautious step. Britain didn't wake up one morning and find itself broken. It discovered the truth in fragments: a burned farm here, an empty fort there, a road no longer safe at dusk. Without Rome, there was no single moment of collapse, only an unending series of small endings. In the west, old Celtic kingdoms stirred, reoccupying hill forts, their people remembering older ways. To them, Rome was already a legend, but survival came at a cost. Identity was now a battlefield. To be Roman meant nothing without Roman power. To be British meant everything and nothing. Then, from the sea, came new names. Saxons, Angles, Jutes. They didn't just raid, they stayed. Timber halls rose, and families arrived. Britain fractured in response. Some fought, some made deals, some fled. The truth of this era isn't a simple story of invasion. It's about people making terrible choices when better ones no longer existed. Britain wasn't waiting to be saved. It was becoming something new, born not from unity, but from struggle. Change did not announce itself with clarity. It arrived disguised as necessity. Where armies failed and laws collapsed, belief stepped forward to fill the emptiness. Britain did not become whole again through force, it learned to endure through meaning. Marcus Albinus first noticed it in places where nothing else survived. In the ruins of a Roman town, stripped of trade and authority, a small wooden structure stood untouched. It was plain, built from rough timber, its roof patched and uneven. No banners flew above it, no soldiers guarded its door. And yet, people gathered there quietly, as if drawn by something deeper than fear. They came not to be commanded, but to be comforted. Christianity had existed in Britain for generations under Roman rule, tolerated, sometimes embraced, often ignored. Now it was different. Faith was no longer an addition to life, it was becoming a refuge from it. When the empire left, it took certainty with it. Belief offered something Rome never could, meaning without protection. Marcus sat among the people one evening as a priest spoke in careful words, blending Latin phrases with local tongues. There was no grandeur, no promise of victory, only survival, forgiveness, and the idea that suffering was not meaningless. Marcus, trained in reason and record, felt something unfamiliar tighten in his chest. History explained how the world changed. Faith tried to explain why. As conflict deepened, monasteries began to rise in unlikely places on windswept hills, near forests no one dared enter, beside rivers that carried both life and danger. These were not centers of power, but islands of memory. Within their walls, men copied texts by firelight, their hands trembling not from cold, but from the weight of what they preserved. Knowledge had become fragile, as mortal as the people who guarded it. Marcus found his way to one such place after narrowly escaping a skirmish between rival groups. The monastery was little more than stone and silence, yet inside it held something priceless. Books, Roman histories, biblical texts, fragments of law, the past reduced to ink and parchment, hidden from a world eager to burn. He stayed there longer than planned. By day he helped copy manuscripts, his scholar's hand steady despite exhaustion. By night, he listened to stories whispered by monks who had once been soldiers, farmers, sons of noble houses. They spoke of laying down weapons not because war ended, but because endless violence hollowed them out. Faith did not erase fear, but it gave fear a place to rest. Beyond the monastery walls, the land continued to bleed. Battles flared without warning. Alliances shifted. Men who had once fought side by side turned on each other over land, faith, or survival. Marcus heard of Wulfgar again, now older, now heavier with victories that brought no peace. His settlements expanded, but resistance grew with them. Blood answered blood, and Britain's soil drank deeply. What changed, slowly and almost invisibly, was the reason men fought. Wars were no longer about Rome or empire. They were about belonging, about who the land would remember. Marcus crossed paths with Wulfgar only once, at the edge of a burned village. The meeting was brief and cautious, two men shaped by different worlds standing in the aftermath of the same destruction. Wulfgar was broader than Marcus had imagined, his armor worn and practical, his eyes alert but tired. There was no triumph in him, only resolve. They spoke little. There was no common language for philosophy between them. But when Marcus mentioned preserving stories, Wulfgar paused. He did not mock the idea. He only said that stories were written by survivors. Then he turned away, issuing orders to rebuild rather than burn. That moment stayed with Marcus longer than any sermon. Fire, once a symbol of loss, became something else. Villages burned, yes, but fires also warmed new halls. Manuscripts were destroyed, but others were copied faster, hidden deeper. Faith spread not because it was forced, but because it traveled light, asking little from those who had already lost everything. Yet hope came with sacrifice. One night, raiders struck near the monastery. The monks did not fight. They hid what they could, and prayed for what they could not save. Marcus helped carry books into the forest, his breath ragged, his hands shaking. A blade flashed in the darkness. Someone screamed. When dawn came, the chapel stood blackened and broken. Several manuscripts were gone forever. Marcus sat among the ashes, grief heavier than fear. He understood then that preserving memory was not a passive act, it was resistance. Empires fell when armies failed. Civilizations died when their stories were silenced. Britain was changing again. Faith, once quiet, now shaped power. Kings sought blessing before battle. Laws invoked God where Rome once stood. The old world of stone and marble faded, replaced by wood, word, and will. It was messier, it was harsher, but it belonged to the people who lived it. Marcus aged in these years. His hair thinned, his steps slowed, but his purpose sharpened. He traveled less, wrote more. He understood he could not save everything. No one could. What mattered was choosing what survived. As winter settled across the land, Marcus watched snow fall over ruins and new settlements alike. Britain was no longer Roman. It was not Saxon. It was becoming something forged between blood and belief, memory and forgetting. And in the silence after the storm, as monks rebuilt and warriors buried their dead, Marcus realized the most painful truth of all. This new world would not remember Rome the way Rome remembered itself. It would remember only what endured. Time didn't heal the wounds of chaos. It taught people how to live with them. Britain didn't emerge as a unified land or a memory of empire. It was reshaped, layered with loss, stitched together by necessity, and anchored by fragile memories. Marcus Albinus, old now, lived near a monastery built from the ruins of a Roman villa. He watched a new world take shape. Kingdoms like Wessex and Mercia were born not from peace, but from exhaustion. Stability, however imperfect, became its own victory. Law was no longer Roman decree, but local oaths made in timber halls. Christianity wove itself into the land, binding fractured lives and giving legitimacy to new kings. Marcus realized that history doesn't move through grand victories, but through slow transformation. The conquerors had not destroyed Britain, they had become part of it. Children played among Roman ruins, speaking new languages, unaware of the past beneath their feet. One evening, a novice asked Marcus why he wrote so much. He replied that the past isn't a place we come from, but something we carry. To forget it is to walk blind. He finished his final manuscript, writing not of emperors, but of the endurance of ordinary people. As dawn broke, he saw a land made whole not by unity, but by its resilience. Britain hadn't been lost. It had simply been becoming. Thanks for watching.